Welcome to another episode of Journeys in Melody. With me today is Dr. Mikhail Johnson. Mikhail Johnson, there's a lot I can tell you. I can tell you that he is from Maroon Town in St. James, Jamaica. Many persons know about Maroon Town, but when you think about Jamaica internationally, it's about Montego Bay, Ocho Rios, Negril, Kingston, but Maroon Town is in the cockpit country, and that's where he's from. He's a classical pianist and composer, award winning, might I add. A few of his awards: he was the winner of the 2016 Neosonic Fest Young Emerging Composers Competition, 2019 Composer in Residence at the University of Notre Dame, South Bend, Indiana, the 2020 winner of the Transient Canvas Composition Fellowship, and there are many, many more. There's a long list of things. Mikhail started his journey as a pianist and composer very early, very young, and he just grew and blossomed. And he left Jamaica and he's now residing in the United States. Welcome, Mikhail, and thank you for taking the time to join.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a real pleasure because I've known you from you were very young.
Yes,
And your mom and your sister. And I mean, I don't know what happened. When it happened, you tell us more about it. But welcome.
Thank you so much.
People love music, and that is the reason people are gravitating to this podcast. And I want to expand the touch and reach of music. You are from Jamaica. Now, we don't have many classical composers and pianists hailing from Jamaica. So you are one of the few. Tell us where that started and how you got into music, classical music to be specific.
The story goes that it was at the age of 4, and my mom was at the age of 4, yes. And my mom was at, it was like a Sunday afternoon, usually, from what I was told, that my mom would listen to a particular station that was on the television while she's cleaning the house, preparing the day, preparing the house for the week. And there would be a classical segment that would be on that television station. This particular Sunday, she was just not in the mood to hear it. She was like, let's move on. I want to hear something else. And unbeknownst to her, I started to cry when she changed the station. And she, for a second, stopped and wondered if this was some kind of like, is there a relationship here? Are you just crying because, you need something else? Or was it because of the music?
Yeah.
And she kind of switched back and forth to test it, to see if it was a fluke. And sure enough, I actually liked the music, and that was what soothed me very much. And so as a result of that, she decided to take piano lessons to have me around the instrument. Then by the age of 6, I got my first instrument, I think, and I destroyed that one. And then I got one maybe like 2 years later for my birthday.
Yeah.
And I've had that piano ever since. It had become like my small little keyboard for even when I started composing. I still have it.
Wow.
It's still back home in the countryside. So it's
wow. That's a lot of value in there. And
yes.
History. If that piano could talk, it could tell us a lot of things.
Yes, because that was the same piano I would normally come back home to after being at church and trying to figure out what was the song that I liked, that I wanted to play. And I was using my ear at the time to decipher what these pieces were. And because, of course, growing up in a very religious household, and church hymns were literally the bread and butter of the way of our upbringing. And so the first song that I actually learned, to my recollection, was Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus. It was the one I was just trying to figure out the melody of it, and I'm just using my one finger trying to figure that out. So as that evolved, I started mixing that with classical music, in terms of like learning a lot of these things by ear, especially when I went to primary school. And my music teacher at the time, who was a pianist, was basically playing these church music and more classically trained music by reading, the sheet music. I didn't know what that meant, but I liked the sounds of them and I was always around
Right.
them. So I was hearing those things, and then
Yeah.
you'd send me a CD to go home with, and I would play it with, or the cassette, and I would go home and I would have my ears glued to it and try and figure out how to play.
Right.
So that was how I was learning classical music at that time. And then eventually I got frustrated because it wasn't accurate.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I started to really take it seriously in terms of learning how to read.
I was going to ask you why classical music, but you just answered that. That's good. Okay, that's classical music. So, as you grew up, when did you choose that this would be a career path for you?
I think it chose me. It was always my first love. And even in high school, I was entering JCDC,
Yes, right.
And it was in the classical categories.
Mm-hmm.
So I really wanted to become a pianist in some way, shape, or form. I did, however, get discouraged because a lot of those who were equally talented as I was,
Mm-hmm.
they had the resources to have professional training, and not
Right.
only to do that, but also have it consistently to the point that they were able to have scholarships abroad.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt as though I was kind of left behind, because the more I started working towards these goals, and by the time I felt I was ready to even apply for something like this, the deadlines or the age limits for those had surpassed past those limits. And so it was very discouraging at that point, because I felt like, oh well, this is only for the young, or this is only for white people. And it really pressed the issue. Because of course the persons who did go forward were lighter skinned than I was. So that did not help my cause.
Right.
And so eventually I gave up and decided to pursue science. It was also my love equally, but music was innate to me, but I did pursue science more intensely.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not until I got to NCU, Northern Caribbean University, that and funny enough, even when I had given up on music, I attended Northern Caribbean University specifically for the music, because of course, as you may know, the commencement services were the pièce de résistance every single year because of the music. And so I was there, even if I was there for science. It so happened that I'm there because that would have been a place I would have been surrounded by the pomp and circumstance, if you will, for the lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And it was not until a lady by the name of Kimberly Khan, who had just graduated from Eastman, had filled the recent position of professor of music there. And she was the one who actually transformed the notion of me having music as a career, not just by the little one-on-one talk that we had, but in terms of the way she taught me. And to see the transformation before my eyes, I think even when I did not know what my next path was or how I was going to get to the next level, it just made me not want to look back. Like it just ended up being that kind of like blinder, a tunnel vision of like, oh, this is what I want to pursue regardless. And I don't know how I'm going to get there, but she really helped me.
It's strange because sometimes I think about myself, and I grew up in a musical household similarly, and I went to Northern Caribbean University, and even now when I think, all right, hang on. All right, this thing is gonna kind of drop out now. Let me just fix this properly. So it's funny that you mentioned that, because I grew up in a musical household and went to Northern Caribbean University myself. And sometimes I think, why are you not in music? You love music so much. Why aren't you in music? But I chose another path myself. So I understand that. But then there was somebody who came in there and redirected you, and here you are, right?
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. Yeah. In terms of the influences that you have in music, those early musical influences, you talked about home and your mom getting you a piano and a music teacher. Then Kimberly Khan came in. Are there any composers or pianists that influenced your music?
that influenced my music.
Yes.
Andrew Marshall. Yeah, he was the one who really tied this idea of, even though at the time a lot of his doings were arrangements of things, the way he taught me and kind of brought me under his wing.
Hmm.
And I think the first piece that I ever composed, which in a way was very different from what I had been doing before, it was called Anthem of Independence. I tried to write a patriotic song, to celebrate Jamaica's independence.
Hmm.
And he performed it with the chamber choir at the time at UWI Chapel at the
Hmm.
University of the West Indies. That was my first foray into this idea of someone asking me to write a piece. It was actually for a course which was about composition, but he liked it so much that he called me aside and said, "Hey, I want to put this on our concert
Interesting.
program."
Yeah.
And so that was my first idea of like, oh my goodness, as a composer, I write this thing, he
Nice.
likes it, and
Yeah.
it's performed by a professional group.
Nice.
And
Yeah.
that was the bug that really started the whole thing. So I started writing a lot of choir music and choral music.
Hmm.
And then, so yeah, he was basically my main inspiration from the composer's end. And then I started seeing other people, kind of scattered abroad, like Oswald Russell, who I didn't know was a Jamaican composer at the time. And then we were doing for the inaugural Choral Scholars Festival, this piece called Jonah by Samuel Felmstead, who we discovered was the first Caribbean or the first composer in the New World. And he was born in Kingston. And we're like, he was born in Handel's time. And we're talking about Handel's Messiah and so on. And
Of
we're like
course.
listening to this
Yeah.
music, which
Yeah.
is basically in the same era. So that is when I started getting bits and pieces of composers who are from the area, who lived and are
So,
having
so, so, so
careers.
have you found through your studies and experience that Black composers are not mainstream because the focus is on the European and North American ones?
I always thought that was the way. I did not know about Black composers
Right.
until
There you go.
my doctorate degree.
Wow.
And that's years, because I left NCU at around 2011,
Hmm.
and it's not until 2021, 20
Just the other day.
just the other day, like 2019, just before the pandemic, as I'm like starting to like develop the way I wanted to reconstruct my idea of what classical music could look like and what is considered the standard repertoire.
Hmm.
For this all this time, I've been force fed that I needed to play Chopin, Beethoven, Bach, Mozart, and not one time I heard that there was a Samuel Coleridge Taylor, there was a George Walker, there was a Florence Price, there was a Margaret Bonds. And I'm like, the more I'm starting to dig deep into this, I was like, wow, it really infiltrated the way in which we engage with this music. And we keep thinking that this was the history, when a lot of that history had been erased or pushed to the side.
That's the
So
reason, even more so, that your work is important and your presence in classical music globally is so important. And
yes,
I'm fascinated really by the fact that so many persons who are not Black, white, and others have been performing your music. And I hope that the composer's name is mentioned.
yes, I'm very, very grateful. And I will put as a caveat that I've known a lot of Black pianists.
Ah,
I've known a lot of Black pianists, but again, they were playing white composers, so
exactly.
that
Yeah.
ended up still being a disconnect. But it was really, really an honor to see people who engage with my music in such an authentic way, that they're willing to learn the language, learn the semantics, the syntax. It's really amazing that when they reach out to me, that they are going in this with the intention of, I want to learn your culture
Yeah.
and what you would want to bring. And it is wonderful because it allows me to bridge the gap for my Jamaican fellows and those of the diaspora,
Right.
to connect with classical music in a different way, because even before I even thought of having music as a career, I was always of the opinion, why is it that classical music is just doesn't seem to connect as much and form this kind of level of elitism with the Jamaican people? Because
Mhm.
I had to go to Kingston to enjoy classical music
Of
most
course.
of the time
Yeah.
if I was not a part of my band program, which was at Herbert Morrison in Montego Bay.
Right.
And I was wondering why was that? And then the persons who I saw in Kingston were mostly of Caucasian descent. And
Yeah.
also there
Hmm.
were very few Black people sprinkling in, but even if the Black people were there, they were kind of disconnected and bored.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was because I realized that, a lot of this classical music thing is very much a connection to something that the country from which they come from have something to connect or call their own.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
so you have Debussy, who's for France, you have Bach and Beethoven, who's for Germany, you have Rachmaninoff and Prokofiev, who's for Russia. And you think of like, they're not intentionally trying to do anything for the country, but because they are such a stalwart
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the grand scheme of the classical realm,
Hmm.
that they by this default have become these beacons uh, for the country.
Hmm.
And so I was like, they're not going to accept or fully understand this because it's a totally different culture. The language is different.
Yes.
The way of the movement of the music is different. And
Hmm.
also the narratives that they will speak about won't necessarily connect. They could connect on some level if they
Exactly.
translate it, but
Right.
from a very superficial level, it just won't resonate. And so when I found that my talents as a composer was going to lead me in this direction, I said it only
Hmm.
made sense. I'm
Yeah.
not doing anything different from what the realm has brought um, to the fore, but I'm just adding the consummate Jamaican flair to it. And so that would really bridge the gap in which, people are seeing music written for them, by them, and the
Hmm.
narratives will be so much familiar, the nostalgia of it all. It's a privilege,
So
really.
how was the Jamaican culture? Because of course, classical music is deeply European, and
Yes.
they are the ones who traveled the world in conquest and pillaging, and then in colonialism, they introduced this music to the descendants of the slaves, and then here you are doing the music. So how was your Jamaican culture then? You have infused it. How has it impacted or influenced the work that you do?
It's it happens in it happens in different stages. So the first one, and my main drive, is to perpetuate and preserve a cultural heritage that will otherwise be lost.
Yeah. Okay.
One, thinking of it from the idea of ideas and uh, musical gestures and rhythms that are usually passed on from the oral to the oral to the oral
Oh,
tradition.
yeah.
And so if they're not documented in some way, shape, or form, then they're just going to drop by the wayside. And of course, people nowadays aren't necessarily interested in poetry or the kind of like learning through apprenticeship, this
Yeah.
kind of cultural doings. Even now the cultural dances are falling apart, and if it's not the people who've been doing it for several years, then it looks like it's not going to be performed at all. And
True.
so I'm trying my best in my own minute way to preserve the things that I've learned.
Yes.
I won't know everything, but at least it would be documented in some way, shape, or form. So that's one part. The second part is to take rhythms, to take melodies. I try my best not to harp too much on the folk melodies because we have a lot of composers who their main way of composing is the reinvention of folk songs and,
Hmm.
and folk melodies. And I thought it best to go into the realm of original music, meaning
Yeah.
that, yes, I could give ghostly hints at these melodies, but they aren't transfixed on me trying to create another arrangement.
Right.
But it's to create a new narrative. Even my recent opera, uh, which is what do you call it? Shortcut Draw Blood.
Mm.
which is based on the Catwoman and the Spinning Wheel. You know,
Wow.
and those who know that story from as young as they were a
Yeah.
child, they
Yeah.
they have an idea of what that story is. So talking about pulling from these narratives, even another piece called Anansi and Fire, and have these stories that are very familiar and visceral to the forefront of their minds become a part of the narrative.
Mhm.
So it's not just me talking about love, but we're talking about Jamaican love. We're not talking about dance, but we're incorporating dance from quadrille, from Dinky Mini, from John Kuno. These narratives are, we're really calling on the depth and breadth of who we are as Jamaicans, and more so the language.
Yeah.
I can't end that without speaking about the language itself, and a lot of the rhythmic idiosyncrasies that we hear are as a result of our speech. And people don't realize how much they're interconnected, because that's how the Germans or the Russians sound a particular way,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the Spanish sounds a particular way. It's because
Exactly.
the speech influenced the rhythmic drive of the music. And so why not Jamaica? So
On that note, I want to play this song, some act of fanfare. Listen to this piece that Mikhail did. Mikhail, I love that piece. I love it. I love it. I love it. I
thank
love
you
that
so
piece.
much.
Let me tell you, it's not because you infused the Jamaica national anthem, and I think I'm hearing some Naya Bingi hits in there with the trombone. I think
It's so funny how you discovered that. And there's another bit in there that I also used. Please go ahead. You said
yeah.
what
Well,
else you hear?
I love movies. I love westerns, and this. If I don't know if you saw the Magnificent Seven, the one with Denzel Washington, but even the older ones, this kind of composition is Star Wars-esque. It's a strong piece that you can hear in a movie, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yes.
It draws you in, and then it has those nice Jamaican elements. Because if you're a
Ri-
Jamaican,
Right.
you will hear
It's
it. It's very
it's
nice.
one of the, what do you say, the prime examples of creativity in the middle of struggle, because this was literally at the cusp of the pandemic,
Yeah,
just when everything started to shut down, and we're still trying to figure out things. And I've always wanted to write. I've never heard any fanfare for Jamaica at all, and I was like, why wait? If not me, then who? And it was a wonderful opportunity to mix two nice themes, which was the Jamaican national anthem. It's nice how you don't hear the actual melody, but the
yeah,
essence of it is, it's
is
still
there.
at the front of your mind. But
Yes,
I also use the patriotic song Jamaica Land of Beauty, the tail end, our hearts salute Jamaica.
there you go.
So those two together created a very, very synergetic feel together. And within that, I'm putting in the Nyabingi, I'm putting in um, those just regular drummings, just drummings in general that are not specific to any dance form, but it
Yeah,
just gives that sense of, as in the words of Andrew Marshall, this talawalik,
yes.
you know,
What a word.
scherzo. It's fabulous.
It's a really really
Really
nice
proud of
piece.
it.
And you can feel the pride in it. If you're a music lover and you love classical music and you're Jamaican or you're affiliated with Jamaica, you will feel it. It's right in there, and the horns are there, and
Yes.
it's like you can just you don't need to edit anything. Just
Yeah.
create the movie and use the track.
And it just goes to show that in a way the sonorities in this are very atonal, in a way, avant-garde, if you will, not so much to the far extreme, but to understand that it's still approachable.
Hmm.
It goes to show that it's really about the familiarity. I'm sure that if the context of this was totally different and I wrote something that was for not necessarily Jamaican influenced, it would not have resonated as directly, or as
Yeah,
readily
yeah. Let me
as
ask
this.
you, what's your approach to composing a piece? Because you hear the thing, you see the finished product. What's the process like?
The process is staring at a blank page and wondering what's the first note, and that's a lot of perspiration. It's I've grown to understand and come to terms with the fact that composing is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. Uh, and so me waiting for inspiration to come to the fore may not be the best course of action. But
Mhm.
I start with noodling at the piano. The piano, which is basically behind me, I'm not sure you'll be able to see it, but
Yeah, yeah, I'm
it's
not saying it now.
my premier way of improvising, and I think I
Mhm.
should start there because earlier, me learning music by ear, I started developing a great improvisational gift. And
Mhm.
so a lot of the hymns I was improvising in a very classical way. Unbeknownst to me, I didn't know that that form of creativity was indeed a form of composition.
Oh,
This idea of improvisation was composing in and of itself. It's just that I didn't write it down. And so that's now become the gateway to which I am finding my ideas through
right.
improvisation.
Mhm. You started your musical journey in Jamaica and
Yes.
then you transitioned to the United States. What has that transition been like? And I want you to talk about the reception of classical music in Jamaica versus the United States and the transition and how you have developed in that space.
In terms of classical music in Jamaica, I would say it's very interesting in the way that I was not necessarily well received as a composer slash pianist, or there was not so much uh, level of excitement, as it were.
Okay.
They could sense that I had some talent, whatever that was supposed to mean. But in terms of accepting me as a professional and being able to engage with me as such, it just felt like I was just only there for entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not until, I would say, when I had my first performance of a larger piece, which was Miseria 2 for string orchestra, which was done by the Immaculate Conception String Ensemble. And that was one of the moments where I was able to transcend this idea of being this kind of like pedestal person, because to more of like, hey, I'm literally one of you guys. Because this was at that time I was very young. This was a young person who, when I came in, the kids knew me as just a pianist.
Yeah.
They knew me as someone who played music just like them.
Mm-hmm.
But they were the ones who were learning Beethoven, and they were learning, Dvorak and all those things, and they were,
Exactly, right.
going away and so on. And then to play this piece, that it was a cold rehearsal. They didn't know who the composer was because my name was not on it.
Yes.
And they learned the piece, and they were like, "Oh, Stephen Woodham, who's the director? He was, Stephen Woodham, sir, this is an amazing piece. Can we have it on the program?" They only had 2 weeks left before the performance. That means this was not supposed to be on the program because they already had the program set.
Yeah.
And the kids were begging to, like, we're gonna work hard, we're gonna learn this, and so on. And when they saw me walk through the door, their jaw dropped on the floor when they said, "This is the composer." It really made me overwhelmed, because this is the first time they're connecting that this is not far-fetched, that someone who's in the island is actually writing music that's amazing. And they're learning it and, in a way championing it. And this is, maybe they just performed this piece. I'm sure it's a different set of people, because some have graduated all this, past this time, but they've performed this piece again. It's become a staple in their catalog. And that is more than all I could ever ask for, to have people from the country.
And I kind of understand, because Jamaica isn't a classical music country. And classical music is often left to the upper echelons of who are more exposed, and again, persons who are expats who have their families and they work and stuff in Jamaica. So I get that part of it. So talk to us about then the transition from that kind of environment where classical music isn't, our Jamaican composers aren't really noticed or known, to what has been happening in the US.
Well, in the US, it now becomes, wow, your voice is really unique. And it's and I understand to what end, because a lot of the music that is around right now is very much atmospheric. The music that they do in that realm, especially in this time, it's very much atmospheric, it's very much gestural, and so it can border on a lot of things from different composers sounding almost alike. And so when I came on the scene, it was like, wait, this is quite different and very much amazing, and we want to know more of you. And it's really, really nice to have that acknowledgement as well, because it's through their efforts of, we like this music so much that not only do we want to promote what you've already written, but we want to put your names in spaces so that they can actually get you commissions to write more music like this. And so I was very grateful that a lot of the spaces that have been afforded, usually you won't get past those doors without management. And to be able to do this just through word of mouth is beyond the Lord's blessing. And so to be able to write this music and have them approach me from a point of, we know what you do and we like what you do. Do as your heart desires. It's a fabulous opportunity that the people who approach me have been welcoming me and all of me with open arms in terms of my nationality and what I bring compositionally to the realm.
So you have done a lot of work in music. Set the stage for us, right? Because this venue is there, people are sitting, people are waiting. there's a grand piano center stage, and you are the one they're waiting on, right? You walk out, and people start applauding. What's that like?
What's that like?
Yes.
Before it was crippling anxiety. It was crippling anxiety, and it's more so because I just wanted to play well. I wanted to show my artistry. I wanted to bring the audience on a really good journey. You know, I've worked very hard, months and months, to prepare this, and I just wanted to play well. And I think a lot of it had to do with the psychology of my preparation. I don't think I was preparing in a way that was efficient. And having learned those tools and now have matured into a way of like my sound and the way I want to present music and the kind of music that I would want to present, it
Mhm.
has now morphed from anxiety to really a great honor to present this music. And also I've walked on stage with even much more, much not only confidence, but just a sense of ease and excitement of wanting to share. And
Mhm.
it's really great when you have an audience who's come out in their numbers just to hear you perform. I feel very humbled that you've taken the time out of your, you know, ever so busy schedule to
Yeah,
stop and listen to me
yeah,
tell my story
yeah.
through the piano. So
In addition to that, you are at a recital or at a concert or something, and another person is singing what you wrote or playing what you wrote. What does that feel like?
that is nerve wracking. It is nerve wracking because what happens is you've basically been creating a child from inception until birth, and now you're kind of giving this over to another living entity in a way where, you know, for us it's the creation process, and for them it's the bringing the notes to life.
Mhm.
And so there are a lot of things that you can control, and there are a lot of things that you can't control. And as someone who created this from beginning to when it's now delivered into the hands of the musicians,
Mhm.
you have this tendency of wanting to kind of clench fist and kind
Yeah.
of hold tight because you want to control the narrative of how it's presented.
Mhm.
But I think the more we start to realize that this is how music actually has a life of its
Yeah.
own,
Yeah.
the more we'll start to embrace the process of what happens when we hand it over. But it is nerve wracking at first, but after a moment, it becomes so not only enriching, but to
Mhm.
feel the reaction of the audience being moved and being and even yourself being moved that this is my life, you know,
Yeah.
and this is what I've been able to create for others to experience. It's not only a great honor and privilege, but
Mhm.
also a very humbling experience that, you know, the narratives that you present are in your hands and you
Mhm.
have total control of that. And so you should use that responsibility wisely.
Yeah, yeah, and I want to also ask you again because there is more. You are in classical music, and you're talking about music that's used from movies, cartoons, ads, you know, all those things. You watch a movie, and the movie moves you to tears. It's not because of the acting so much, but the
Hmm.
score behind it. So
Yes.
you are doing that kind of music. You spoke about starting from a blank page, right? But
Hmm.
then you start putting these little symbols and notes on the paper, and you go through and you do the work, and you have all these lines and symbols on paper. The score is done. People who have spent years practicing and putting and growing their music from strings or horns, drums, whatever, they come together in a room, and it's your little symbols and stuff on a paper that they have in front of them, and they start playing. It's amazing when that comes to life. When you see an orchestra come together and perform something that you put on paper, is it accomplishment? What is that? What does that do?
It is accomplishment because it's very different from a smaller ensemble or a
Yeah.
solo.
Yeah.
because you get to really shape and mold a lot of the sounds that are coming from one instrument, or like a conversation between two or three instruments. But when we talk about 80 plus musicians, it's a euphoric feeling, and it's also a very tense feeling, because with orchestras, there's not a lot of rehearsal time. You may think, when they come together, they only do it maybe once or twice. And there's a lot involved compared to a solo where they could send stuff to you and say, what do you think of this? What do you think of bits and pieces? Whereas you kind of have to come to the orchestral setting almost ready, because time is money and you can't waste time. And, so everything becomes amplified in terms of, wanting to be perfect.
Yeah.
And in some cases, things take place much better than you expected, and other things end up just being learning experiences to be like, okay, I never really liked this, but you could choose to revise it, but that's going to be at another time. Or, the deed is done, let's learn from this and we'll implement it in the next thing. But it's a great honor to even get a foot in the door, because it's very hard for you to get booked by orchestras. It's a great responsibility, and it's very, very amazing when the musicians come to you and tell you personally that they enjoy the piece.
Yes.
That is the greatest accomplishment, because a lot of times it's very easy to write something and it sounds impressive from the outside, but in other cases it might not be the best playing experience for the musicians.
Yeah.
And so in that case, they are able to justify it's a great piece. It's hard, but it's a great piece. There are other cases where, people are clever for the sake of being clever, and it's a lot of hard work, but the result just does not benefit. And so it will end up being, well, this was all for nothing. And so I try my best to be very mindful of the performing experience. And I think that helps me as a performer myself, that the learning process be equally as enjoyable as the performing process. So I am very, very happy when musicians come to me and say, I really enjoy your work and it's such a fun piece to play.
All right.
It really warms my heart.
Talk about the challenges you face as a classical composer and pianist.
Surprisingly, I'm very thankful that it's not from a place of racism, but it's a place from internal struggle.
Right.
And for a very, very long time, I have definitely suffered, especially through the pandemic, where my space that used to be my sanctuary for relaxing has now become equally my workspace. And I'm usually being like, oh, my space is separate, because of course I was at school. So at school, the environment is, they have separate things. They have all the facilities there. And so you could separate that. For a very long time, that was kind of like a psychological warfare, because it's like, now all the tools that I need to be working are in the same space that I should be resting. And so that really struggled with my creativity. Other things that I struggle with, procrastination. The idea of it's a heavy task. I have a lot on my plate. And I prefer to watch YouTube videos than to brave the storm of writing notes on paper and not even sure if I like it. And the other part is perfectionism. I want my idea to be definitive. Anything that I write down is the Bible. And sometimes, and many times, it is not the case. It's through the struggling and through the pushing to find what it is, and even putting random things on the page without any expectation, that you are able to find your golden nugget. And I'm like, I've done this several times, and I'm always waiting for the perfect moment and the perfect idea to feel like I could continue. But what about just starting and just letting it unfold naturally? Because at the end of the day, the piece is going to write itself. So why not just get to work? So it says, inspiration is always there. It just has to find you working. I'm trying to remember who said that quote, but it's very true. You just have to be working.
Absolutely.
So those are a few of the struggles that I've had. There is still a struggle in programming Black composers in the classical world.
Yeah.
whether they would like to think that they're making progress or not, that is the way things are. And yes, there are changes that are being made, but then there comes the point of sensationalism of age, because
Yes.
now I'm at a stage where I'm very grateful that my career is starting to take off, regardless of my age, which
Hmm.
before used to be a determining factor, that if you weren't entering these competitions by the time you were 25, or if you get past 29, then well, too bad for you. Or if you get past
Yeah.
25, too bad for you. And I've been able, through the grace of God, to have people in my circle put my name indoors, or are a part of something as big as, being an artist in residence there. And they're like, now that I'm here, I want you to be my composer
Hmm.
for this event. And so they've basically kicked the door down on my behalf and have brought me along with them for the ride, which I'm very grateful for. And so it's very hard to be programmed in these spaces on their own volition,
Hmm.
because if you're not famous, then they don't feel as though you're credible. And it felt the same way in Jamaica, where if you weren't making a career abroad,
Yes.
then you weren't considered credible Jamaican artist, which was
Yeah.
very unfortunate, because it would have been nice to be, which I would say, to an extent, I definitely was, through the likes of Andrew Marshall bringing my
Right.
works
Yeah.
in those spaces, and for Stephen Woodham performing that I was able to have a semblance of that. So it was not entirely doom and gloom, but there were opportunities where I had reached out to other peers of mine for consult, for inspiration, for
Hmm.
a helping hand, and I was shunned,
Yeah.
uh, for the sake of competition. Who knows? For the sake of uh,
Envy.
envy. I don't know.
Yes.
But it was really unfortunate, and I think that really taught me that I wouldn't want to be this way.
Hmm.
Because music really thrives as a community,
Yeah.
and in order
Absolutely.
for us as Jamaican people to really make a stamp, it really had to be, for the good of the people, and
Yeah.
not for our own.
And guess
Uh,
what? That stamp that you speak of, you spoke of not getting that kind of space, or in Jamaica to practice, but it's true for music generally in Jamaica. You find that most, if not all, our artists, they had to leave Jamaica at some point and then
mhm.
spread that music and then grow. And they return home all the time. But then the Jamaican music has become a global sensation because, we have left and practiced and
Yes.
introduced this cultural phenomenon to the world. I want to talk about two things. Support from people, family, friends, and whoever. And then I want to talk about education, music education. Walk us through that academic aspect of it. What has been your academic growth in music?
I am very, very fortunate to have a family that was not about, oh, you have to be a doctor or a lawyer. I was very, very happy that my mom was okay when I did my exams at sixth grade, and they were asking you what are your top choices for school, and I said I wanted to go to Herbert Marson because they have a great band program, and she's like, well, you have to work hard to get your first choice, and for that to be a reality, and to know that my mom did not have me, think of like music as just an entertainment thing, but she saw that I was serious about it. And she's like, listen, I don't care what you do. Because even when I took up science, at NCU, she was, a little bit, confused, because she was like, I thought music was your thing. And I was like, I gave her my reasons, and she's like, listen, as long as you're doing this to the best of your ability, I'm here to support it 100%. Losing parents is not easy. I realized that for, a long time, I had been avoiding, that, even when my mom was
Wait,
ill.
let me ask you properly so I can
Mhm.
put it in the. You have experienced loss in your life. How have you handled that, and how has that impacted you as a person and your career?
Uh, I I think that loss, to be more specific, the loss of both of my parents, uh, in on one front, it's funny to say that, being so young and experiencing the death of my father, because my father passed away when I was 12 years old. And while that was hard for me, in a way, I don't know if you would consider that a blessing. And people would say, "Oh, that's morbid,"
Yeah.
but to think of how would I have even been a musician if my dad was alive? I don't think that would have been. Or, I don't think it would have been at the level that I was, because of course there are certain expectations about what would be career driven and so on. So that's one end. The other end of my mom passing away on the very year I got a scholarship to study abroad. That is a completely new game. At least she got to hear as my final words that I got accepted to study abroad. And her last words to me was, "I'm proud of you, my son." That was very heartbreaking, because now I am going to a foreign country knowing that there is no immediate family in terms of parentage to fall on. All of this is now either relying on my external community or myself. And so that was very hard to navigate, especially everything was so close, in close proximity, because it was like death, then, of course, dealing with the funeral and still being able to understand the process of grieving, and then having to be at school. So it was very challenging, but I was very grateful for my church community in Ohio, who really surrounded me. And, as I mentioned, without one dime to my name, have raised funds, have given me opportunities, have allowed me to play at their church, and have given me a platform to really expand and showcase my talents. It just goes to show that, the Lord will put people in your place to really assist and console and comfort you. And so that really gave me great solace in knowing that I was taken care of. And so I was able to really move forward and think about the things that really mattered. And I was able to grieve properly. And in some cases, maybe not entirely, because of course you had to kind of still, move forward full speed ahead. But nonetheless, I will say it had really lifted a huge burden on what I thought would have been a very trying time. And to have the support of my family and friends who, if they weren't inviting me to come and perform at a church or abroad, or, they were the ones who were giving my names to other people, that was very telling of the support that they had for my talent. That translated into the way I got to the United States, and I was very much supported, because even my church families in the United States, I did not know who they were. They didn't even know who I was, but my talent was what helped them push to support me in cash and in kind. And they were the ones who gave me the opportunities to study and perform in Europe, because they were the ones who were doing the tag drives and the fundraising events for me to go. And I was just like, wow, these people don't even know who I am, but through my gifts, they were able to say, this is a cause that I'm willing to support. I don't know where I would have been if I never had that band program. That band program was really the crux of it all, because it taught you a lot about camaraderie, this idea of performing with a group, coming together as an ensemble, making something sound good. And we were one of the few ensembles that were not only competing, but we were touring.
You've gone as far as your terminal degree, and you have reached that place. You have done your doctoral degree. How was that shaped or influenced how you approach music?
In a way, I felt like the doctoral degree was just me being hungry for knowledge. So I learned a lot through my doctoral degree. I was able to really blossom and flourish as an artist in the way that I have. The other side of it is being able to perform with great sound, the idea of longevity of career in terms of playing in a very healthy way, the idea of learning and being given opportunities from my own professors to be like, oh, here's a great opportunity for you. Let's see if this would be a great fit. They're putting opportunities at your door to be like,
Yeah,
hey, try this out and don't be afraid of failure and see how this works. I'm sure you could have gotten that anywhere.
of course.
But speaking from my perspective of what I've been able to receive through my terminal degree, those are some of the things that
Yeah.
have really aided the longevity of my career. And thankfully, they have also been a pivotal part in that both of the schools that I've been to, when I became alumni, they reached out to me and commissioned me to write pieces for
There you
them, which
go.
they paid the
And these
commission
schools
for.
are
Bowling Green State University and Texas Tech.
perfect. And talking about that, I always say university is not about just getting a degree. It's about meeting people and opening other doors and doing other things that will push you along the journey.
I've always said to my colleagues, and I say that to people who are just building their careers, that the people who are beside you in school are the ones who make or break your careers.
Yeah.
And they think that, oh, this is something that, oh, I'm just gonna go ahead and kind of like be a hermit crab and practice and compose, and one day it will be performed by the London Symphony and so on. I was like, yeah, that's a nice perspective to have, but that's not how it goes.
Yeah.
Usually it's through the people who you've been nice to and or
Exactly.
not
Yes.
nice to
Yes.
while you were colleagues
That's so true.
at school. And it's very funny to see how a lot of the commissions that I've received were co-signed by people who I went to school with or have now been established now in higher places and have reached out to
There
me to
you
be
go.
like, I've had
Yep.
such an amazing experience with you with our last time we performed, or
Yeah.
you performed my piece so well. Not me. I'm talking
Yeah.
about I'm performing someone else's work
Right.
that they composed. And
Exactly.
they're like, oh, you performed my piece so well. I want to recommend you for this, opportunity, so on and so forth.
That's a huge life lesson because how you carry yourself and how you relate to other people, how your demeanor and everything comes into play in building a career in music. Now,
Indeed.
I want to ask you, what keeps you inspired and motivated?
Seeing others do the things, just being like going to orchestral concerts. Like I'm supporting my local orchestras when they have amazing soloists come in, when they have new works being premiered. That's really amazing to see, like, for you being a part of history, because before you're like, Beethoven's music was this how many years ago, but I can imagine the look on their faces and the audience at that time learning or hearing music being brought to life for the very first time. And it's the same thing where I am being a part of history for someone else, where their music is being performed for the first time. That's very inspiring. And
Yeah.
to also have people listen to my music and say, I really love how I'm starting to enjoy classical music more so because I now know that there's something for me. It's very heartwarming, and that was something that I've always wanted to establish, because that was what I wanted to experience growing up anyway. So
Right.
it's like me writing music is music that I've always wanted to hear.
As a Jamaican, you're as a person from the Caribbean, what would you say to a young person who wants to get into classical music? They're not sure. They don't know what to do, where to start, how to go about it. And what would you say to that person to encourage them to do it as a Jamaican?
I say that you should find people who are within your circle. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to cold email and call people who are teachers, who are educators, who are a part of these musical programs, because they are going to be the ones who will be able to help you and at least direct you to the proper channels to pursue these things. Don't be afraid to take risks. It's a very difficult field, and it's something that you have to want very bad. It's something that you would want to pursue at all costs, regardless of what it would be like monetarily.
Yeah.
Also, feel free to reach me.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah.
I'm open to putting your name in spaces that will be a good fit, or a good prospect. And my hope is to work towards a scholarship fund
Mhm.
in getting students from Jamaica to be able to study abroad. And my goal is to hope that they'll be able to have at least their first year of college completely paid for, which is accommodations and all of that, even to the flight,
There you
so
go.
that they don't have to worry about struggling to like be in that space. And I really hope that I can make that a reality one day. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's find that community, and don't be afraid to, even when you're being rejected, use that as valuable
I was
information for
going to
you.
ask you about that bit before we ended.
Yeah,
But
even
not being
even when you get
accepted. Yeah.
rejected, yeah,
Yeah.
just feel free to feel all those feelings of rejection, but use those as tools to those who are willing to help and those who are not. And let that be valuable information for you moving forward. But do not give up. And it's very important that you find teachers that are willing to push you in a positive way,
Mhm.
that will really contribute to your growth. Be a constant student. Be open to learning. Be in a constant state of practice. You could never fail.
Thank
You so
you.
much.
Thank you so much for taking the
It's such an
time
honor, such an
to
honor.
talk
And I mean, it's
and to
been a long
share.
time coming, and it's to understand that this is someone who I've grown up with.
Yes.
It's equally heartwarming
Yeah.
to be a part of this.